You guys see the title of the episode. Thing about doing an episode like this is 50% of the people are going to see that title, not even click on the video, assume that I'm a dickhead. Of the remaining 50, 25% will hang out just long enough to get into the comment section and tell me I'm a dickhead. Of the remaining 25%, 20% will take the time and the effort to try and manipulate and misinterpret everything I'm about to say, and 5% of you will actually legitimately listen to what I have to say. So for those last 5%, thank you very much. Here's the pod. WWE does not need an Evolution 2, and that's a good thing. Let's talk about it. What's going on, everybody? It's your buddy, it's your pal Spaz Phoenix, the YWC Reality Check, and here's an episode that's going to make me super popular, isn't it? Let's get all the nervous laughter and anxiety out of the way right now. Yeah, you saw the title. I'm going to say it one more time. WWE does not need to do Evolution 2, and that's a good thing. I'm here to tell you that while WWE's women's divisions are amazing, if you've heard myself and Jake DeMarco recently, especially with something like NXT, we've talked about the women's division more than the men's. This is not me wanting to take away opportunities from the women in WWE, or anywhere for that matter. This is much more a evolution is not the way to do it type of pod. So if you want to come along, if you want to listen to what I have to say, I've basically got it broken down into 3 sections. For those of you that are going to misinterpret this as, oh, Spaz is just out here hating women, I've been doing this a long time. I defy you to go through any of my content and see any of it as being woman bashing, etc., etc., etc. But the news has been, in the past little while, as it does resurface every now and then, and as it does resurface usually in conjunction with Nikki Bella flapping her gums about something, which is another thing we don't need, but that's another video for another time. There is a rumor out there, a speculation out there, somebody's put it out into the ether that WWE might finally, in tight air quotes, be doing Evolution 2. I'm here to tell you why. I mean, ultimately, if they do it, I'll watch it. The women's division in WWE is awesome. I'm sure the show will be fine. Before I get into the points that I want to get into here, it's one of those things where you don't get to decide whether you like it anymore. I've said this a lot when it comes to movies and TV and whatever. What do you think of this movie? It was good. What do you think of this movie? Oh, it was bad. What do you think of this movie? Oh, I didn't really like it. Oh, how can you say that? Look at the actor. The actor checks this box or that box. Did you like the Marvels? Did you think Marvels was bad? Well, you're a terrible person. Did you like Black Panther? You don't like Jordan Peele? Whatever the case may be, you thought the Lady Ghostbusters sucked because it did, not through the fault of the women involved, but because it was just a generically shit movie. Now, take that mentality and apply it to wrestling, where people don't like, and it goes for everybody across every field, across every demographic, across every social issue there is right now in their entertainment. People don't want to be told what they need to like. And much like, I mean, I'll use the example of Black Panther. I think Black Panther is an awesome movie, but it does lose a couple points because you go into that movie knowing that people tell you have to like it. I do not want to bring any more of that element, because there's already a lot of that element in wrestling. I don't want to bring any more of that element into wrestling, because if we do Evolution 2, it'll be exactly like the first one, and you will not be able to criticize it objectively. That's a thing. The first one was decent. It was a different idea. It was kind of cool for the time. I was curious. Everybody had their curiosity piqued, etc. I will say it was a bad show, but it's good that it happened. It's one of those things. WWE took a swing. I don't think it particularly worked. Look at some of the people involved for why that didn't particularly work, but you weren't allowed to say it, or if you did say it, you got painted in a certain way, and if you did say it, oh, you're only saying that so you don't get in trouble. So nobody wins with something like an Evolution. That's more of a personal thing. But here's the plus. Here's the top side. Here is the silver lining on the whole thing. We don't need Evolution 2. We don't need it. That's the point. That is the premise. That is the crux of what I'm going to tell you guys. It's awesome that we don't need it. And that's the point. Broken this down into 3 separate sections here. First of all, we're going to have to flash back to why the first Evolution pay-per-view happened. Second of all, I'm going to try and explain to you guys why I think doing an Evolution 2 is really fucking condescending to the women in that division. Third of all, we're going to talk about something that I'm sure is going to make me even more popular, and that is the representation myth. So, you've been given the preamble, you've been given a little bit of my personal opinion. Now we're going to get into the crux of the pod itself, and if you want to hop off at any given time, do me a favor, actually, I'm really curious. For those of you that have listened even this far, if you decide to hop off at any time after this, we're about 5 minutes in already. If you decide to hop off, tell me when you decided to hop off, because I'm really curious about that as well. So let's talk about the first thing. Why did Evolution happen in the first place? Not Evolution with Triple H and whatever, but you could say this Evolution was kind of because of Triple H too. We don't need to talk about it. The Give Divas a Chance, the Women's Revolution did happen in NXT, which was fronted by Triple H at the time. It is what it is. Maybe the wordplay is there for a reason. Let's talk about why Evolution happened. Evolution happened as a direct result of WWE doing the shows in Saudi Arabia. Now, before we get into that, there are other reasons to be against the Saudi Arabia WWE shows. Not touching those with a 10-foot pole, and I am not also brushing those under the rug. I am specifically looking at the Saudi Arabia shows through the lens of the fact that they were in the beginning men's-only shows. Now, that's one of several issues with the Saudi Arabia shows. This is the one issue in particular that I am talking about. Hopefully I'm being clear enough about that. Now, it was done as a result, or as a response rather, to the Saudi Arabia shows which were not in the initial days allowed to have any women on them. So, let's balance the scales. Let's do a ladies show because they didn't get to be on the Saudi show. Reasonable. Very, very reasonable, and if the world was still the same, I would have an entirely different conversation with you right now. But here's the thing. It was only the case for 3 shows. It was only the case for 3 shows. The glass ceiling, if you want to call it that, was shattered by Natalya Neidhart and Lacey Evans at Crown Jewel 2019. And there have been 9 shows since then. So there are 3 times as many WWE Saudi Arabia shows with robust female participation as there are shows that had no female representation. And other than 205 Live, which we're going to talk about later, it's the only shows ever that have been specifically male-oriented. So, yes, as a response to the Saudi Arabia shows, because there was no women allowed to be on the Saudi Arabia shows, which was bad, by the way. Let me be clear. The whole going to Saudi Arabia, leaving the other politics aside, because I'm looking at one very specific instance here, the fact that the women were not allowed to be on those first initial 3 shows, bad, horrible. I'll be the first one to put my hand up and say it. Evolution, as a response to that, to sort of balance the scales, absolutely all for it. Didn't turn out to be a great show, but I'm still glad that they did it. But that argument has to be caveated. It has to have that asterisk beside it of, there was no women allowed on the Saudi Arabia shows for 3 shows, and then they did 9 with a lot of female representation, including Renee Paquette being on commentary for the entire show for one of those shows. I can't remember which one at the moment. So there are 3 times as many Saudi Arabia shows that have robust female participation in them as there are shows that didn't have any women on them. Now, in this day and age, and this is not a dig at AEW, but if you want to talk about progress in comparison, you have to compare the market leader to its closest competitor, which laughably is still AEW. There are now more female wrestlers participating in Saudi Arabia WWE shows and the Friday night shows that they do now, etc., etc., etc. WWE Saudi shows have more female participation by, I guess if you want to say by percentage, by comparison, to any AEW weekly show or pay-per-view. Now, that's a sad statement on AEW as much as it's a positive statement for WWE, but it is what it is. But didn't the whole outrage over the Saudi Arabia shows and the lack of female participation prove that doing a show allowing only one gender, specifically based on gender, was a bad thing, a horrible thing, and a thing that needed to be rectified, a thing that needed to be balanced? Did that not set the stage for, let's not exclude people because of gender, let's not include people because of gender? It was bad. We negated it. There's female participation in all WWE shows now, everywhere from WrestleMania to brand newly debuted WWE Evolve. very, very thick, robust female participation across the board. And again, I'll say, on a brand like NXT, far surpassing the men. And that's awesome. Like, if you've heard me do any content on NXT, either myself and Jake, the ladies are killing it. The men need to step up on NXT. It is what it is. So the fact that the reason that Evolution needed to happen in the first place has been completely negated and wiped off the face of the earth, it has to be said. It's an old point because it's not a point anymore. Second, and this is where we're going to get into some tricky stuff here, the existence of Evolution 2, or the conversation of Evolution 2, is really fucking condescending to the women and the amazing, amazing women on that roster. We just recently got Jordynne Grace, Julia, Stephanie Vacour, Zarya, who used to be Delta. You got the three relevant horsewomen still in WWE. We're waiting on the returns of people like Asuka and Becky Lynch and all this type of stuff. Even on Evolve, even in NXT, even with some of the major crossovers, some of the major crossovers between WWE and TNA have been majorly based on the female competitors and female championships. The first one to cross the line was TNA Knockouts champion Jordynne Grace taking on NXT Women's Champion Roxanne Perez. The women have led that groundbreaking business deal with TNA. The roster is killing it across the board. Even the lower level gimmicks, the secondary titles. Chelsea Green is killing it as a second tier champion. Lyra Valkyria is developing, not quite at the same place as a Chelsea Green, but she's an awesome competitor. Give her some more involved opponents and all that, and we're going to be right there. The tag titles are another thing that's sort of finding new life once again, and once again we've sent women's tag teams over to TNA to fight for their tag team division as well. So, with that being said, the idea, or the part that's not said about the existence of an Evolution 2 is, if you do Evolution 2, what you're basically saying is we have to move all the men out of the way so that the women can succeed. And that's absolute bullshit. And that's absolutely detrimental to the fucking awesome women they have on that roster for all the things that they've broken through. The historic flagpole moments, the glass ceiling. I hate that expression, but it is what it is. There's not a single stipulation. There's not a single pay-per-view. There's not a single main event. There's not a single anything that is men's only anymore. The last hurdle for them to get over was to have a female main event at WrestleMania. And that was broken. I know a lot of people want to say Sasha Banks and Bianca Belair, but it's not. They were the second, because the first one was a triple threat match, they were the fourth and fifth woman to main event at a WrestleMania, and it was on night one, so it doesn't really count. The groundbreakers were Becky Lynch, Charlotte Flair, and Ronda Rousey. Now, what you may think of those individuals individually does not change the fact that the last hurdle the women's division had to get over that they hadn't done yet was main eventing WrestleMania, and they've done it. Main eventing weekly television, Raw, SmackDown, NXT is commonplace now. We don't even flinch when an NXT pay-per-view ends with a women's title match. We didn't flinch at Roadblock very recently when Julia and Stephanie Vacour unified, temporarily at least, the Women's Champion and Women's North American Championships. We don't flinch anymore that there is a Women's Royal Rumble. Oh, by the way, if I can go back one, because I knew I would forget something, the Saudi Arabia shows didn't used to have any women participants for the first 3 shows, and then we got the representation back in there where it needed to be. And next year they're going to do the Royal Rumble there, which is an entirely separate conversation, but it means you're getting at least 30 women on that card for a Saudi Arabia show. Tony Khan still needs to catch up. But every stipulation, the Rumble, the Chamber, Hell in the Cell, Iron Man matches, hardcore matches, main eventing, like I say, main eventing Raw, SmackDown, NXT, main eventing pay-per-views, main eventing big stage, big 4 pay-per-views. The first Survivor Series, where all 3 brands were brought together in the Battle of the Brands, was main evented by who? It was main evented by the 3 women's champions of the 3 rosters. It was Becky, Bayley, and Shayna Baszler, if I'm not mistaken. I may have that wrong. Somebody correct me down in the box below. the idea that these women crawling up the roster and crawling up the card and crawling into those main event scenes and stipulations and title situations naturally is not enough, and to give them a pat on the head and say, okay, once a year we're going to do this little DEI pay-per-view as a handout, as a pittance, as a, throwing change at beggars, is ridiculously insulting to the division as a whole, because you're creating a show where you're on the card, but you're on the card because you're a chick. No, all the women that are crawling up and finding all these cool spaces right now are crawling up on the card because they deserve it. Rhea Ripley and Liv Morgan have been at the top of Raw, and potentially the top of Raw as far as representation on pay-per-views for a long time, because they are stars, because they have earned it. People say, I guess Liv Morgan's doing, I hate to admit it, but I guess Liv Morgan's getting better. First of all, she's been good for a long time. Second of all, why do you hate to admit it? I know why. Again, another story for another day. They're crawling up the cards because they're stars, not because this is the month where we decided to give the ladies a handout, because the ladies don't need a handout. They're grabbing it. Don't expect, what's the expression? Don't expect somebody to hand you the torch. Don't wait to be passed the torch. Take it. And the ones that are killing it right now have Tiffany Stratton, Liv Morgan, Rhea Ripley. Some people will say Bianca Belair, fine, cool, whatever. Io Sky, Bayley, Becky Lynch, when she comes back, is walking into a fanfare that she deserves. A WrestleMania main eventing fanfare that she deserves, not because, hey, we've decided WrestleMania is for chicks this year, which is entirely weird and whatever. The other side of this as well, and it's something I don't want to say because it kind of paints WWE in a bad light. If they gave the women a whole pay-per-view all to themselves, are there a couple people backstage that are not as opulent and forward-thinking as the rest of us, and that might just think, all right, if we give them their own pay-per-view once a year, the rest of the year we can kick back and slack off and let it fall into a rut? That is a dangerous thing to play around with too. Like, do we give them? Is this the one show where you get to be awesome because we're using just you guys? Or do you just let them be awesome all year and make the guys fight for their spots? Again, I go back to my example of NXT. The men's division on NXT is weak right now. It is. It's really cool to see the development of Eddie Thorpe. We've got fan favorites like Javon Evans. We've got Trick Williams, who people are in a really weird spot with right now. The debut of Ricky Saints, the next most recent superstar to get called up from AEW, is awesome, but they don't have that one male figurehead that's sort of sitting above the parapet on the men's side. On the women's side, you've got 10 women fighting for that spot, and that's awesome. And it's not because you've kicked the men off the card, it's because the men and the women are there and the women are killing it. Keep doing that. Another thing coming out of the conversation of the last Evolution pay-per-view, with the way that the women are sort of pushing their way forward right now and earning their spots and getting their spots, etc. I'll keep going to Rhea Ripley because she's the biggest star they have on the main roster right now. You can disagree with me, argue with the wall, it's fine. If they do another Evolution pay-per-view and it fails, do they then look at it from a money point of view instead of a progression point of view and say, well, I guess the women don't draw? Let me just tell you something right now. I'll tell you something, and these are raw numbers, and raw numbers are cold, but they are going to factor into some stuff eventually right now. The Evolution pay-per-view that they did do drew less than 11,000 people. It was really small. It was on a really small scale. They struggled to fill the building that they had, and the audience reflects it. Now, there's a lot of performative women's wrestling on that show, but it didn't perform well overall. And other than people saying, it's kind of cool that it happened, like me, I didn't particularly enjoy the show. I haven't gone back to watch it until very recently. It's a bad show. I'm glad it happened, but that's about it. A lot of people that are patting themselves on the back, going, oh, wrestling did a good thing, and therefore we're all good people. But what do you remember from that show, and who showed up for it? Less than 11,000 people. I think it's like 10,800 something. Not the ladies' fault, but it is what it is. Somebody looking at numbers, somebody looking to make calculations and big business deals, would they use that as an excuse to decrease the amount of progress the ladies have been making in the past couple of years? Because let's be real, less than 11,000, looking at numbers for this year so far, the Raw debut on Netflix alone, Raw, regular episode of, okay, not a regular episode of Monday Night Raw, but an episode of Monday Night Raw, 17,500 roughly in attendance. Saturday night's main event, which again, special show but not exactly a pay-per-view, 16,400. Royal Rumble, 70,000. Elimination Chamber, by the way, I was there, 38,000. If they decide to put on an all-ladies show and it draws 1,100 instead, do the dickheads in the back or the guys counting the coins in the back say, well, there's our answer, the women don't draw? Don't give them the opportunity to say shit like that. Have the ladies crawl up a card that has men and women on it to prove that they should be at the top of the card. Put Rhea Ripley in the main event. Put Rhea Ripley in the main event of Elimination Chamber like they did in Perth, for example. I think it's much more meaningful for her to main event in Perth because they're in their hometown than for her to main event because we've just swiped all the men off the board. Now, from a fan point of view, everybody likes different things. Some people like tag team wrestling, some people like cruiserweight wrestling, some people like hardcore wrestling, some people like brawls, some people like really, really technical wrestling, some people like men's wrestling, some people don't like women's wrestling, some people don't like men's wrestling, some people only tune in for the women. My point being, a single division show or a single division pay-per-view or a single division production is never going to succeed to the point of a full WWE production, because what have you done? You've only brought half of your weapons to the battle. 205 Live was the last thing they did outside of Saudi Arabia that was men only. And not only did it die a death, it died a slow death. It became a joke. Once again, if this pay-per-view happens again and falls on its face, draws 10,000, maybe 11,000 people compared to what it could do if you had the full breadth of the roster in there, do you want the ladies to become a joke like the cruiserweights became a joke? Because 205 Live, like I say, it died a death. It became a secondary place for NXT stars that weren't getting on NXT. They threw some ladies on there just to spice it up and make you maybe want to care about it. It became Level Up, which has now become Evolve. And what do Level Up and Evolve have in common? You're using the whole breadth of your undercard roster. You're not saying, we're going to give you half the roster. It's going to die a death. It's not going to be the ladies' fault, and the ladies are going to be the ones that are going to suffer for it. Besides that, if somebody makes it to the main event of a card, like a WrestleMania, it means you've gotten to the top of the mountain, not gotten to the top of half of the mountain. You're decreasing the accomplishment, you're decreasing the historical moment, you're decreasing the accomplishment of whoever gets to that main event scene. So, yeah. You don't have to get the men out of the way for the women to succeed because they're doing it anyway. They don't need a DEI handout once a year because they're doing it anyway. Do we want them to slack off the rest of the year because they gave them one night, or do you want to let them be awesome all year? Do you want to be held to the standard of what the results happen to be on one night, like the last Evolution, or do you want it to be a wider scoped conversation? The entire idea of Evolution 2 is condescending, detrimental, and damaging to a women's division that is thriving right now. Now, third part's going to get me in a lot of trouble, isn't it? It's because it's the representation conversation. Representation is important. Representation is a conversation that always needs to happen. We need to have all ages, all races, all genders, all orientations, all walks of life, all different styles, all fight styles, all nationalities. Everybody needs to be included, but they need to be included representationally. Here's the thing. Women don't get as much time on WWE television as men. I'm going to get repetitive here. Watch NXT. Women get more time than the men. And note that I'm not pointing that out as a bad thing. It's fucking awesome. The ladies are killing it in NXT. Roxanne Perez, Julia, Stephanie Vacour, Zarya, formerly known as Delta. Jordan Grace is now in there. Some of the ladies that aren't having as much to do on the main roster are coming back down and giving that clip. We've got a Women's United States Championship match happening this week on NXT because Chelsea Green has come down to face Sol Ruca. I'm looking forward to that match. It's one of my most anticipated matches this week. It's going to be a lot of fun. But if we want to talk about representation, you have to talk about math. WWE, at a glance, looking at their roster, talking about their active, ready to wrestle people that are being featured every week, that are not injured, that are not celebrities, that are not part-timers, that are not legends, etc., etc., etc. You're looking at about 110 men and 67 women. So, if we were to say that there has to be an exact amount of women and men on every show, we have to balance the scales. It has to be 100% equal all the time. Say you have 10 men and 10 women on a show. Cool. That leaves you with 57 women sitting back in catering. It leaves you with 100 men. You are telling the men that almost twice as many of you have to sit in the back and do nothing because you're men. And I'm not saying poor men. I'm just giving you the math as it is. So you probably see an approximation of how the populations in the back line up in the daily programming. Now, do you not like the programs that they're in? Whatever. If you see a women's match and it's not the woman you wanted to see, if it's a Rhea Ripley match or it's a Liv Morgan match or it's a Becky Lynch match or whatever, and you're going to say it doesn't count because the women that you wanted to see were Bianca Belair and Naomi crying for 20 minutes, that doesn't mean that you didn't get a women's match. It means you didn't get the woman you wanted, which is an entirely different conversation that you can't dress up as being sexist or being not representational. That is what it is. I'm sorry, that's the part that people aren't going to like, but it is what it is. So the representation myth is in fact a myth. Now, what do they have to strive for? One of the things about representation is, what do you have to strive for? You have strives and goals and all that kind of thing. There's a guy that's going to win the Royal Rumble. There's a girl that's going to win the Royal Rumble. There's a guy that's had a Hell in the Cell match. Maybe there's a couple of ladies that are going to have a cage match. But the big thing, the big sort of representation of success in your particular profession is, can you go for a title? Can you achieve a goal? The titles are like for like now. As soon as NXT created the Women's North American Championship, you knew that the main rosters were going to follow suit, and everything matches up one for one, except for one case, but even that case doesn't really hurt. There's a world title, a women's world title, a WWE title, a women's WWE title, a US title, a women's US title, a women's Intercontinental Championship to go with the men's Intercontinental Champion, a NXT champion, a women's NXT champion, a NXT North American, a women's North American. The only one where you could say there's a bit of a discrepancy is there's 3 sets of tag team titles for the men and 1 for the women. But, big but, the women's tag team championships float over all 3 shows. So a couple of things. Each set of women on each show still has a tag team belt to go for. So on every show, there's men that have a tag team title to go for and women that have a tag team title to go for. Additionally, and a bonus of the women's tag team championships floating over multiple rosters, is that whoever is the women's tag team championships, this is illustrated exquisitely by Bianca Belair and Naomi, they can be seen 3 times a week. The only, in the built-in kayfabe logic of WWE, the only stars that are guaranteed a potential showing on all 3 shows in the week, being Monday, Tuesday, and Friday, is the women's tag team champions. There's no men's title that gets you on every show. There's no mid-card title that gets you on every show. There's no singles title, period, that gets you on every show. Even the men with tag team titles are pretty much constrained to their particular show's roster if you follow the WWE fictional setup. Now, do they break that all the time? Of course, but I'm talking about the storytelling structure of the thing. So the only thing that is 3 for 1 is the tag teams of the various divisions, and they compensate for that by that one title holder being able to be seen 3 times. And I think that pretty much balances the whole thing out. Again, representation is often argued over in really, really unreasonable scenarios, like, oh, why did that Maxine Dupree match get cut from SmackDown so that The Rock could have a promo? Well, because Maxine Dupree is Maxine Dupree and The Rock is The Rock. You want to talk about drawing power, The Rock is going to draw more than Maxine Dupree. Does that mean Maxine Dupree is bad? Does that mean we're punishing her for being a woman? No, it means that The Rock is a bigger star. I'll give you two more closer examples. If the guy booking the show has 10 minutes to kill and says, I can put in a CM Punk match or a Zoe Stark match, Punk's going to get the nod. On the other side of the coin, if the choice that guy has to make with that 10-minute segment is, am I going to put in a Charlotte Flair match or an Akira Tozawa match, Charlotte Flair will get that spot. Now, is that us punishing Tozawa because he's a dude? No, it's because Charlotte is a bigger star. That is a thing. And break it all down, what are we all doing? What do we all go to work for? These stars want to entertain us. They want to put on a good show. They want to excel in their craft and whatever. But at the end of the day, they're going to work, and they're going to work to make money. If you have 12 pay-per-views a year, that means everybody on that roster has a chance to push themselves into 12 pay-per-views in a year. Add in Evolution, and what you've done is you've divided the roster by gender and said, you guys have 12 opportunities, you guys have 13. Because there's no way in hell, especially after the backlash that we talked about in the beginning over the Saudi Arabia shows, there's never going to be an all-guys pay-per-view to balance that out. You could do 3 Evolutions a year and you still wouldn't get one guys pay-per-view. And here is the key point, the key difference, and the key thing that I want to leave you all with, because I'm pretty much done, and I'm sure you're tired of my voice and you're tired of hearing me talk about this. Not a single person out there, unless you're an actual asshole, is asking, not a single person out there, unless you're an actual sexist asshole, is asking for an all-male pay-per-view. Not a single one. Because it would be just as shitty, and I would make every single point that I've just made tonight in the other direction if they were. If you find somebody out there that is asking for WWE in 2025 to give us an all-guys show, point them out to me, I'll tell them off myself. This is my case. The reason it exists in the first place doesn't exist anymore. It's super fucking condescending, and everything beyond that is based on the representation myth, as I've just outlined. WWE is in a pretty awesome spot right now. Their women's division absolutely kicks ass, and because of that, we absolutely do not need Evolution 2. And that's a good thing. I've been Spaz, your YWC Reality Check. Subscribe up there, talk down there, start a conversation, keep all these conversations going. Don't be a stranger. I will talk to each and every last one of you later, but for right now, I am tagging out. Bye, guys.